Dear viewers across the world, most welcome to my channel NAGA WORLD CONFLICT ZONE. Context: what could be the worse than Netanyahu? Meet Israel's new prime ministers. Asked in 2018 if he would advocate a shoot to kill policy against children breaching the Gaza border, Naftali Bennett retorted, "They are not children, they are terrorists." During a cabinet session, Bennett argued, "If you catch terrorists, you have to simply kill them." When a colleague pointed out that such an approach was illegal, Bennett referred to his own time in the IDF. "I have killed lots of Arabs in my life, and there is no problem with that." With Iran deploying its missile and proxy throughout the Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq, and Israel launching airstrikes against Iranian targets, Bennett, who has become prime minister if Israel new coalition survives, may preside over a regional war in the near future, at which point this enthusiasm for killing Arabs and Muslims may acquire fateful significance. Benjamin Netanyahu may have overseen a grotesquely ugly regime in its ceaseless effort to murder a two-state solution, but the mutant coalitions potentially replacing him is an altogether more bizarre prospect. Comprising 8 parties from across Israel's political spectrum, one of these factions is an Arab party led by Mansour Abbas, who we can only hope will rapidly pull the plug if Bennett returns to his predictions for shooting Palestinian children. Bennett's extreme right aspirations for annexing the West Bank often made Netanyahu look dovish. He celebrated Donald Trump's 2016 victory by gluttoningly predicting, "The era of a Palestinian state is over." Bennett's political bedfellow is Yair Lapid, a centrist who has taken care to cultivate himself as a security hawk. A few brief months ago, Bennett swore never to share power with Lapid and Abbas. Now, if all goes to plan, Lapid will succeed Bennett as prime minister after 2 years, which is why many grassroots supporters of these figures are now denouncing them all as traitor and opportunist for countenancing such an alliance. After 15 years as prime minister, if Benjamin Netanyahu genuinely has been defeated, this is the end of the era, and never has there been a more deserving candidate for imprisonment on corruption charges. That Netanyahu held his country hostage for 2 years, forced for senseless round of back-to-back elections, and killed off a whole succession of cabinet forming initiatives purely to evade jail, adds an additional level of poetic justice to his belated downfall. The readiness of former allies such as Bennett, Avigdor Lieberman, Gideon Sa'ar, and Ayelet Sheikh to act together to dethrone him is testament to what a toxic figure Netanyahu became, even on the far right of the political spectrum. Following the bloodshed of recent week, the terrible legacy of Netanyahu's years of self-serving misrule have become all too obvious by killing of all avenues to a just peace, while seeking to slowly strange the Palestinians out of existence. He has made such explosion of anger inevitable, not just inside the giant prison of Gaza and the West Bank, but inside Israeli cities where mobs of deranged settlers took to the streets with the intention of tearing Arab citizens to pieces. The 20% of the Israelis with the Arab citizenships were once relatively reconciled to life within Israel state. This consensus has been fatally undermined by a succession of the hard-right leaders who rendered non-Jews second-class citizens, along with racist attack and media demonization. That the Arab Party played a decisive role in ousting Netanyahu has opened eyes to their power when non-Jewish minorities act together. This mobilizations of Arab activism is a sweetly ironic component of Netanyahu's legacy, particularly with demographics remorselessly trending in favor of Arab and other minorities. Israeli journalists predict that the ousting of Netanyahu's ultra-orthodox stablemates will loosen these factions' pressure like grip on the state, allowing for secular and progressive voices to argue that Israel has spent the past 20 years traveling in an erroneous, dangerous directions toward pariah statehood. There has been a conspicuous exodus of wealthy figures from Israel, despairing at the ceaseless turmoil and fearing that their luxury Tel Aviv homes were sitting ducks for Hamas and Hezbollah missiles because of Netanyahu and Bennett's indefinite deferral of a peace solutions. It is glaringly obvious that there must be a credible path to peace, but never have we been more bereft of the capable leader. We have a Palestinian leadership that has eroded any semblance of democratic legitimacy. Western leaderships hoping to focus their attention as far from the Middle East as possible, and an Israeli coalitions likely to disintegrate at the first whip of political crisis under a prime minister who argues that the era of the negotiation is over. Sorry. If we are to accept Arafat's speech of the brave, there must be intensified effort to find courageous, far-sighted leaders ready to do everything it takes to bring lasting stability and justice to the region. Israel is meanwhile losing the global battle for public opinion. Never before has there been greater readiness in the US and the West to voice criticism of Israel, with Democrats in the US Congress questioning whether it is tenable to continue bestowing billions of dollars upon a state engaged in illegal occupation, ethnic cleansing, and apartheid if Western publics continues to watch Israeli bomb murdering Palestinian children on the evening TV news, then it is merely a question of when the dam breaks and Israel finds itself alone on the world stage. By selecting as prime minister an extreme right politician who sees nothing wrong with the mass murder and expulsions of Arab citizens, Israel only brings the moment closer when it no longer has sympathetic allies to shield it at the Security Council and other international bodies as moderate Israel's war. Bennett's fanatical aspirations for an aggressively expansionist, monolithically Jew state risks showing the seeds of Israel's demise. So, in this way, if present Prime Minister Bennett go ahead, then what will happen in future nobody knows.